Leonardo elucidated certain interesting topic like order effects that we could consider in his research, but I would say it's much worthy of attention to say it's walking on eggshells than science, but just a few questions that we could consider. We really don't know which laws of physics we can consider for understanding of brain and mind. We can feel that classical physics would not be very good for that purpose, but in general we don't know. And we don't know if we can, as the best approach, if we can use Cartesian dualism or something other. So according to Descartes, mind and cognition, consciousness is out of his world. It's dualistic, res cogitans. On the other hand, for example, Francis Crick has shown his approach to consciousness in 1980s and later, and he found that we can, or he believed that we can understand mind and consciousness using scientific methods. That would be a lot of interesting topics, but I'm not small. So, on the other hand, when we think about quantum mechanics, observation process is part of that. So we use the term consciousness and observation in all we do, at least at certain interpretations of quantum mechanics. So it's not so far when we are considering quantum mechanics to consider consciousness as well as part of the process. And why stress? It seems to be far of each other, but it's not so far. When we are experiencing stress, that means specific events, that we are in tension, that we are disintegrated, we are in conflict, we would like to find a solution that we have not available, and so on. So it's specific a mental process in which certain mental events cannot be connected together. So that's the term splitting or dissociation, as Freud, Janet, and others found later, and they find that when we experience stressful events, it changes mind a lot, and it's kind of splitting during conflict. For example, when we have a trouble in a relationship to someone, we can be really in a situation that sometimes we don't know if we love the person or if we hate the person. So an extreme case is, for example, borderline personality disorder that I will show after the slide. But just I mentioned here, for example, when we apply mild stress influence before the traumatic event, we can measure the response, physiological, psychological, and so on. And when someone would experience traumatic event, then any mild stressful events would be experienced much more, and psychological and physiological response would be much higher. So, in general, stress produces conflicting mental situation that really changes the mind itself. So when before the stressful event, when we could consider the observer as an integrated, after stressful event, no, that would change entropy of the system. So just an example of borderline personality disorder, which is typical by strong splitting in human relationships. Such a person really may hate someone, and after a few minutes big love to someone. It changes, big affective instability. And it's a kind of, or we could consider that, like written here, that similarly as in quantum physics, when we consider uncertainty relations, it means that two events cannot be observed simultaneously. So this process we can experience in brain and mind as well. So we could have a certain assumption that in certain situations, brain states and mind states may work on the principle of uncertainty relation. So two events cannot be experienced or observed simultaneously. So that could make sense from point of view, because we don't know what really works in the brain, if some quantum mechanics may play a role or not. And as we know, so for example, Jung and Pauli discussed a lot of things regarding psychology and quantum mechanics, and also Niels Bohr when he proposed this complementary principle of complementarity, he discussed psychological issues, and some people say that, or wrote that the basic thoughts that Bohr had was related to psychology regarding the complementarity principle. So really hard to say. Yeah, soon. So we can ask also the first question that I had at the beginning: is there a unity between mind and brain, or those are different kind of existence? And just final thoughts. What we know now, stress may influence morphological structures in the brain, may cause, for example, decreased hippocampus, decreased corpus callosum, and some other structures. On the other hand, stress, when it's integrated, for example, during mindfulness meditations, there was published quite a lot of studies that opposite effects may influence brain in an opposite way. So it seems that mind is not just something. It may be influenced by matter, but it's possible that mind may influence matter as well. So that would be very interesting. And we don't know what it does mean, in fact. Also what Craig proposed first, and then current evidence shows that mind is an integrative process within the brain. And it doesn't work in one place. It's much more than localized particle. It's like widespread place. Like widespread in the space of the brain, like a wave. But we don't know. Just a few thoughts. And who is the observer? That's the last question. Thank you.
Thomas, can you set up while we take the question?
Questions from the floor?
When you speak about the state of mind, I mean, state of an individual in a particular situation, is it possible to give a formal definition of that? I mean, you could just think about the physicist and think that there's a hidden ultimate state governing the physics of all that stuff. And you go into the operational way, as a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and you go into the lab. Can you give a formal definition of an operational definition of state, or is this a kind of a non-exact concept?
It's really hard to say, because we have mental states, and every mental state we will define will be done using a mental state. So it encircles. So I think that intuitive definition is better than
Yeah.
for this purpose. But we can I'm finished. We can just have an assumption that there is a correspondence between mental state and brain state. That might be an important point of psychophysiology today, because we can then study mind using, for example, questionnaires or individual structured interviews and things like that, and then we can measure psychophysiological responses like EEG and so on, and then find the quantitative relationships. But we need to finish. Thank you.
I don't need more, so I think 30 minutes from